For nearly 8 years, Megan Hill never had a reason to lock her back gate. Her neighbor, Mr. Collins, was the kind of man people trusted without question. He was 52, polite, always waving from his porch with that quiet smile that said, "You're safe here." He'd bring over her mail when it got mixed up. He helped her fix her fence after a storm. And when Megan's husband passed away 2 years ago, it was Mr. Collins who showed up on her doorstep with soup and kind words that seemed to reach straight into her grief. To Megan, he wasn't just a neighbor, he was family. The kind you thank God for when life gets hard. But sometimes, the people we trust the most are the ones hiding things we're not meant to see. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to Famous Crime Cases, where we uncover stories that challenge what you think you know about humanity. Megan Street was small, just 12 houses. Everyone knew everyone. And in neighborhoods like that, trust wasn't earned, it was assumed. So, when Mr. Collins offered to watch her dog, Bailey, while she visited her sister out of town, she didn't hesitate. She left him her spare key, a list of Bailey's feeding times, and a thank you note on the counter. Everything seemed fine, until she got back 3 days later. The first thing she noticed was silence. Bailey didn't bark when she opened the door. She found him trembling in the corner, tail tucked between his legs, something he never did before. Then she saw the scratch marks near the basement door. Now, here's the thing, Megan had never been down there. It wasn't really a basement, more like an old storm cellar left sealed by the previous owners. The door was heavy, painted over, and she always kept it locked. Boys, at least she thought she did. Because that night, she found the latch broken and faint muddy footprints leading toward it. Her first instinct? Maybe someone broke in. Her second? Maybe Mr. Collins had gone down there accidentally, thinking it was storage. But the footprints were too small. And what she saw next made her stop breathing entirely. A small silver bracelet, caught under the basement door. It wasn't hers. It belonged to her daughter, Emily, who had gone missing 10 years ago. Megan froze. Her daughter's disappearance had shattered her world. Emily was only 8 when she vanished walking home from school. Police searched for weeks. The community held vigils, and everyone, including Mr. Collins, had helped put up posters. He'd even helped her comb through the woods behind their homes. But now, 10 years later, her bracelet was here. In her house. Under the basement door that was supposed to be sealed. Megan's hands shook as she picked it up. Same butterfly charm. Same initials engraved. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear herself whisper, "Emily?" She called the police immediately. They arrived, examined the door, and confirmed it had been forced open from the inside, not the outside. The hinges had been loosened, almost like someone had been working at it quietly over time. They checked the basement. It was empty. No signs of struggle. Just an old wooden chair, a coil of rope, and a rusted metal toolbox. But one officer found something else: small strands of long blonde hair caught in a crack in the wall. Emily's hair had been blonde. Narration grows darker. Over the next few days, police questioned everyone. Neighbors, old friends, even Megan herself. But one person wasn't home, Mr. Collins. He'd left town the day before she returned. No note. No word. Just gone. People in town started whispering. Maybe he was just avoiding the chaos. Maybe he was scared. But Megan knew in her gut this wasn't random. Because she remembered something. Something she hadn't thought about in years. Back when Emily disappeared, she told police that the last person to see her daughter was Mr. Collins. He told them he saw Emily walking toward her house, smiling. He said he waved at her and she waved back. That was it. That was his story. But now, as Megan stood staring at that broken latch, she realized something she'd never allowed herself to before. Maybe Emily never made it home. And as the police expanded their search, they uncovered something chilling. Mr. Collins wasn't who he said he was. His real name was Raymond Cole, and 20 years earlier, he'd been a suspect in another child's disappearance, 1 county over. The case had gone cold. He'd changed his name, moved, and started over. And for years, he'd been hiding in plain sight right next door. Megan thought she knew him. Everyone did. But when the basement door opened, so did the truth she'd spent a decade trying to forget. And what they found next would change everything. When police confirmed Mr. Collins' real name Raymond Cole, everything Megan thought she knew about her life began to crumble. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was betrayal. Because every warm smile, every act of kindness, suddenly looked like camouflage. And yet, the strangest part, a small part of her still couldn't believe it. How could the man who watered her flowers when she was grieving also be the man who might have stolen her child? Detectives widened the search, interviewing neighbors up and down the street. Some remembered harmless things, Raymond helping carry groceries, fixing fences, giving Christmas gifts. But others mentioned details that, in hindsight, didn't sit right. One woman recalled how he always volunteered for neighborhood watch patrols, but never actually reported anything. Another said she once saw him talking to kids at the park long after sunset, claiming he was just making sure they got home safe. At the time, no one questioned it, because Raymond was the kind of man you wanted to believe in. Investigators began digging into his property records. That's when they discovered something odd. The blueprint of his home showed 2 storage areas, but only one had a visible entrance. The other was sealed behind drywall. And guess whose house shared that wall? Megan's. Late one evening, Detective Reed returned to Megan's kitchen. He laid out old photographs, some of the missing child case from 20 years earlier, others of her own daughter, Emily. In each photo, Raymond appeared in the background. At vigils, at search parties, even outside Megan's home, standing near the police tape. He'd been everywhere, watching. Always close, but never close enough to blame. Reed's voice was steady when he said it, but Megan could feel the weight behind every syllable. He didn't just happen to move next door. He chose the street. That night, Megan couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made her flinch. She replayed years of conversations in her mind, his odd compliments about Emily's bright smile, his insistence that children should never wander too far. And then she remembered something that chilled her to the bone. A summer afternoon, years before Emily vanished, Emily had come home crying, saying she didn't want to play at Mr. Collins's house anymore. When Megan asked why, she shrugged and said, "He takes pictures of me when I'm not looking." Megan had laughed it off at the time, said he was probably just joking, maybe testing a new camera. Because that's what good neighbors do, they give each other the benefit of the doubt. Now, that memory felt like a knife twisting slowly. 2 days later, police finally located Raymond's truck abandoned near a river 20 miles away. Inside they found a duffel bag with a burner phone, spare clothes, and a hard drive. When digital forensics cracked it open, the truth spilled out. Hidden folders labeled only by numbers. Photos, videos, dozens of them. Some were from local playgrounds. Others were of neighborhood barbecues, school events, and Megan's backyard. But the worst were time-stamped 10 years earlier, the summer Emily disappeared. The footage showed a little girl playing with chalk on the sidewalk. Then, a man's shadow moved across the frame. A voice, soft, friendly, familiar, called her name. "Emily, wanna see the puppy I found?" The camera cut off. That was the last frame. Detective Reed said later it was one of the hardest cases he'd ever seen. Because beneath the horror was something deeply human. How easily kindness can disguise cruelty, how innocence can mistake danger for safety. Megan sat through every hour of evidence review. Her face remained still, her hands clasped tight, as if holding herself together. When the screen went black, she whispered, "I trusted him." No one in the room could look her in the eye. The police believed Raymond was still alive. They issued an all-points bulletin alerting every state line. But as weeks turned into months, hope faded into obsession. Megan refused to leave her house. She said if he ever came back, she wanted to be there. She wanted him to see what he'd done. And then, one rainy night, nearly 4 months after his disappearance, the sound returned, that same slow creak of the basement door. Megan froze at the top of the stairs. Lightning flashed through the window, illuminating muddy footprints across her kitchen floor. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the whole street could hear it. She reached for the phone, but stopped. For the first time in her life, she felt something stronger than fear. Anger. She picked up the heavy flashlight from the counter and whispered, "Not again." And as she stepped toward the basement, one thought echoed through her mind. He came back to the place he thought he controlled. But this time, the power had shifted. Fade out with low rumble. What happened next would turn a decade of silence into a reckoning no one saw coming. It was past midnight when Megan realized the sound wasn't in her head. That slow creak, that whisper of hinges she thought were sealed forever coming again from the basement door. She didn't run this time. She listened. One step at a time, she moved closer, her flashlight trembling in her hand. At the bottom of the stairs, the beam caught a figure. A man's silhouette. Still, silent, exactly where her nightmares had left him. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then, in a voice that carried years of guilt and calculation, Raymond said, "You were supposed to forget." The next seconds were a blur of motion and echoes. But what mattered wasn't the struggle, it was the reversal. Because for the first time, he was the one cornered. And Megan, the woman he'd once seen as fragile, met his gaze without fear. The storm outside raged, lightning flashing against the small window at the top of the stairs. Neighbors, hearing the noise, called the police. By the time officers burst through the front door, the confrontation was over. Raymond was taken into custody, silent, eyes empty. And Megan stood at the foot of the stairs, shaking, clutching the same silver bracelet that had started everything. She wasn't just a grieving mother anymore. She was a witness, a survivor, and finally the voice her daughter never got to be. At the station, Raymond confessed in fragments, enough for investigators to understand what had happened a decade ago. The missing child cases from 2 counties were reopened. Evidence from the hard drive linked him directly to them all. The quiet man next door had been hiding entire lives in the shadows of his basement. But he hadn't counted on the one person he'd underestimated the most, Megan. The news spread fast. Headlines called her the mother who solved her own child's case. Reporters camped outside her house for weeks. But Megan stayed inside, curtains drawn, trying to breathe again. Detective Reed visited her one evening and said, "You know, you stopped him. That means something." She nodded, staring at the bracelet resting in her palm. "It means Emily can rest," she whispered. Months later, the basement door was sealed for good. The town replaced the old hinges with a memorial plaque for Emily and the other victims. And every spring, children in the neighborhood plant white lilies along the fence line, Megan's idea. When she walks past them, she sometimes hears Emily's laughter in the wind. It isn't haunting anymore. It's home. If there's one thing this story teaches, it's that evil rarely arrives with a warning. It smiles. It helps with chores. It wins trust one small favor at a time. But it also teaches something deeper, that courage doesn't always look like strength. Sometimes it looks like a trembling hand still reaching for the truth. Megan spent 10 years living next to her daughter's secret. When that basement door finally opened, she didn't just uncover a crime, she reclaimed her power. And justice, though late, finally found its way home. When Raymond Cole finally stood in court, the town showed up in silence. Every seat was filled, neighbors who'd trusted him, families who'd shared his barbecues, children who had once waved at him from their bikes. They came not for the spectacle, but for the why. Because that was the question that echoed through every mind. How could someone live beside kindness and turn it into cover? Megan sat in the second row, her hands folded around Emily's bracelet. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Every photograph, every piece of evidence, every witness who said he seemed so normal, they all spoke for her. When the prosecutor described the hidden room and the years of deception, the courtroom felt colder. Raymond kept his eyes down, never meeting hers. But when the verdict came guilty on every count, he finally looked up. Not in anger. Not in remorse. Just realization. The mask he'd worn for so long was gone forever. The gavel struck. Justice, long delayed, arrived like thunder. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters asked Megan what she felt. She said only one sentence. "I'm done being afraid." Those words made headlines. But to the people who knew her, they meant something simpler, that the quiet woman who once apologized for taking up space had become the conscience of the whole town. Detective Reed visited her weeks later with a box of returned evidence. Inside was Emily's school notebook. On the first page, written in a child's uneven handwriting, was a line that read, When I grow up, I want to help people feel safe. Megan closed the book, tears welling, and whispered, "You did, sweetheart. You did." The case changed more than one life. The city council started new safety programs, background checks, neighborhood meetings. People learned to look out for each other again, not with fear, but with awareness. And when they planted the annual lilies that spring, every child placed one white petal in Megan's hand before running off to play. It wasn't pity. It was gratitude. Because her courage had reminded them that even the darkest secret loses its power the moment someone chooses to see it. At night, Megan sometimes sits by her window, lights off, watching the houses across the street. She doesn't check the locks obsessively anymore. She listens to the ordinary sounds of safety returning. Children laughing, a dog barking, the soft hum of normal life continuing. And in those moments, she understands something she never did before. That evil doesn't win by violence alone, it wins by silence. And the way you defeat it is by refusing to stay quiet. Megan's story isn't just about a mother who found the truth. It's about what happens when one ordinary person decides the truth matters more than fear. When a locked door finally opens, it can expose horrors, but it can also release the strength that was trapped behind it all along. Months passed. The courthouse that once echoed with testimony now stood quiet, its steps dusted with fallen leaves. The case that had gripped an entire town faded from the front pages, replaced by newer headlines. But for Megan Hill, time didn't erase the story, it transformed it. She still lived in the same house. The garden was brighter now, filled with lilies, lavender, and light. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles at first, then simply with conversation. Some said they admired her strength. Others just wanted to say thank you for showing them what vigilance looked like. But Megan always smiled softly and said the same thing. "I wasn't brave. I was just tired of being afraid." On the first anniversary of the verdict, she invited the neighborhood kids to paint the old fence. They covered it with bright handprints, red, yellow, sky blue, and in the center, Megan brushed a single white butterfly. Emily's butterfly. As she stepped back, sunlight caught the silver bracelet glinting on her wrist. 4 years it had symbolized loss. Now it symbolized endurance. A local teacher asked if she'd speak at the community center about safety and trust. She agreed, though the idea of standing before a crowd made her palms shake. When the night came, she looked out at the faces, parents, teenagers, even Detective Reed in the back row and said, "I used to think monsters lived in shadows. Now I know they live anywhere kindness isn't questioned. But the good news is, so does courage." The room fell silent, then rose in quiet applause. It wasn't loud. It was grateful. Afterward, Reed walked her to the parking lot. He told her that, because of her case, a statewide database had been launched for cold missing child files. Already, 2 new investigations had reopened. She nodded, tears forming not from sadness this time, but from the feeling that Emily's story was still doing good. She wanted to help people feel safe, Megan said. "Looks like she finally is." There's something powerful about ordinary people who refuse to stay ordinary when the world demands courage. Megan wasn't a detective or a lawyer. She was a mother who listened to a sound no one else heard, who followed it into the dark, and who came back carrying light. The basement door was sealed long ago, but its lesson stayed open. Trust is sacred. Silence is dangerous. And truth, no matter how late, can still save lives. Music swells, hopeful. On quiet evenings, Megan sits on her porch with Bailey curled beside her. She watches the street lights flicker on, one by one, the way they always did when Emily was small. And sometimes, when the wind moves through the lilies, she swears she hears her daughter laugh clear, free, and far from fear. It isn't a haunting. It's a homecoming. Because when justice finally breathes, love does too. If you found the story meaningful, consider subscribing to Famous Crime Cases for more real-life investigation and human stories.